Good evening, everyone. Happy spring. It's official, finally. I'm Carl Russick, the Vice Chair of the North Coventry Township Environmental Advisory Commission, and welcome to our final episode of our winter webinar series. We're lucky to be joined by Kate Hasapes from the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Um, Kate was, and the topic, as you can see on your screens, is living with PA wildlife. Bit of a brief bio for Kate. She was born and raised in Montgomery County, has a BS in environmental biology from Millersville, a master's in forestry and wildlife management from Stephen F. Austin State University in Texas. Worked up and down the East Coast in various wildlife projects, including feral hogs, waterfowl, and deer. Was a wildlife biologist with the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Department for 7 years. Did 4 years in environmental compliance with the U.S. Air Force, and she is very happy to be back home in PA, working with the PA Game Commission.
All right, thanks, Carl. So today, with today being the first day of spring, living with Pennsylvania wildlife, we're going to touch on some subjects of, things are starting to warm up a little bit. You're going to see some more baby wildlife coming out. Maybe some diseased animals coming out there you're going to be seeing. So we're going to cover a lot of information in the time that we have. So let's go ahead and get started. So the main topics we're going to look over is wildlife and human interactions, and that's the positives and the negatives. Wildlife conflict issues, again, coming into spring season with baby season, go over some injured or orphaned wildlife information, and then finish with some common wildlife diseases and really focusing on the Southeast region and particularly around Chester County. So wildlife in your backyard. Every year, PGC is inundated with calls pertaining to wildlife in urban and suburban settings, and a number I definitely want to throw at you is in 2024, our region alone received over 15,000 calls, which averages about 41 calls a day regarding the sick, injured, roadkill animals, orphan animals, and nuisance wildlife, and that is a tremendous amount. If you think about us being, Philly in the suburbs. That human wildlife interaction is a big component to our region. So positive wildlife interactions, people love to put up the bird feeders, the bird houses, bat boxes, even planting native vegetation for wildlife habitat, going to parks and refuges to visit and view wildlife. These are all things that we really enjoy to do. But then there's the opposite side of that, right? So our negative wildlife interactions, where we have deer coming in and eating our gardens or getting hit by cars, raccoons in the trash can, squirrels in the attic, bats in the house. There's a variety of different things that people don't like about having wildlife in their backyard. The two pictures in the middle there of the game cameras, game cameras are really big, helpful things for the public as well as the Game Commission to figure out what's going on in the landscape when we're not there to see it. So this was a case when I worked down in Louisiana where somebody called and said, hey, I have a bear that's coming to my yard every few nights, grabbing my trash bag, pulling it over my 6-foot fence, getting the trash all in the woods behind me. You guys got to come out and do something about that. So we went out and did an investigation. Sure enough, it looked very much so like a bear nuisance issue. So we put a game camera up and we caught this little guy, right? This is quite possibly the biggest raccoon I have ever seen in my entire life. It's almost the same size as that bag of trash. But knowing what that creature was, it was a lot easier to give them some advice. Make sure you put your trash in the trash can, secure the lid with a bungee cord, and it solved all the problems without having to worry about a bear actually in your backyard. iNaturalist is an excellent website to go look at other animals that you have, if not in your backyard, at least in your nearby area. So what I did here, I went to iNaturalist and this red block is the North Coventry Township area. And all those dots are observations that the general public has seen and put into iNaturalist so people can go out there and see what's on the landscape. This is an excellent website. You can filter it by address, by county, however you want to do it. You can also filter by species. So you could just look at mammals or look at birds or look at reptiles, insects, whatever you're interested in to see the different species that you have around your area. It's an excellent website. So these are your common creatures that you're seeing back there. You have your possums, your rabbits, squirrels, skunks, deer, foxes. These are the common ones that everybody tends to see that, sometimes they mind and sometimes they don't mind in their backyard. And then you have these little guys, right? So some people don't like snakes in their backyard. One thing that, again, looking through iNaturalist, I was able to see the most common snake species that you guys have in the North Coventry area. And so this list right here is you have your common water snake, eastern rat snake, eastern milk snake, your garter snake, and that cute little brown guy in the bottom right corner, that's the DeKay's brown snake. He only gets about 6 inches long, full grown. Notice how I didn't say that any of these snakes were venomous. Looking in the entire, really Chester County as a whole, could you encounter a venomous snake? Yeah, we have some copperheads around, but their prevalence is very, very low. So these are really your big, snakes you're going to see or potentially see in your neighborhood. I know my neighborhood, we have a ton of garter snakes running around in the springtime. So with that, again, sometimes with the snakes, people think that it's a venomous snake when it's not, because we had this case of mistaken identity. That happens more often than people think. You just get a glimpse of an animal, you're not quite sure what it is. So this is another case, another reason why game cameras are really good at helping us identify these animals that the people have questions about. This is another case we had when I worked in Louisiana. So backtrack, I've only been back in Pennsylvania for 1.5 years. So my Pennsylvania stories are a few versus my Louisiana stories. But this was a really interesting one. Guy sent me this game camera picture and he said, I did it. I finally got a picture of a mountain lion. It happened. Here's a mountain lion in Louisiana. And looking at that picture, it's pretty suspect, right? Flat back, small round ears, looks like it's stalking up on those deer. So I asked him, I said, I need you to send me the very next picture on your game camera, or the one right after this one. And in this camera picture, you could see, there's 2 does right in the front. It's hard to see it, but behind this animal's back, there's like a little hump because there's another deer over there. The very next picture, there were 4 does in the camera. And all the subsequent pictures after that were just these 4 does eating around this feeder. So it's not a mountain lion. It's actually a mature doe coming in. She doesn't like the fact that the other does are there. So her posture is more of a, hey, get away from my feeder. That's my feeder. And trying to scare those does away. So that mistaken identity, it happens pretty often. So don't panic if you think you see something. Let's go ahead and investigate. So getting into wildlife conflict issues. So everybody knows the whole saying, if you build it, they will come. And that's really pretty true for wildlife as well. But if you don't want it around, let's not build it. Let's not give them that opportunity and that habitat. So, some things I have down here is don't feed the wildlife if you don't want them around. If you don't want birds, don't put out bird feeders. It's pretty simple. But with that is don't leave your cat or your dog food out at night. So if there's some outdoor cats that you're trying to help out and feed, that's fine, but at night, bring that food inside. So you're not out there bringing the possums and the raccoons and the skunks to your property to eat that food that you left out for the cats. Similar to the case we saw earlier with the raccoon, make sure that you secure your trash can lids. Just a simple bungee cord can keep a lot of animals out of your trash. Keep your yard mowed and clean of debris and trash. This is a big one for people that don't like snakes. If you have let's say wood piles in your backyard, or you like to burn wood and so you have your firewood in a pile in the backyard. Those wood piles attract mice and rats. That's good in mice and rat habitat. Well, what eats mice and rats? Snakes do. So if you have habitat for the prey, expect to see the predator as well. So if you don't want snakes in your yard, make sure you just kind of keep things tidy and clean and not provide the habitat for the prey so that the snakes don't show up. And another one is to seal holes in your house and your sheds where animals can get in. And we'll see a slide here in a little bit that talks about how to do that. So what do people think about the first thing when they have a nuisance animal? The first thing they think about is trapping it. So we have 2 methods that we can do, lethal and non-lethal methods. And the general public, the live trap non-lethal method is the most commonly used. If you went for a lethal method, you have to go through the whole process of having a trapping license, only do it during trapping season to follow our hunting regulations, versus the non-lethal methods just using a live trap. Anybody could put a live trap out there. There's really no regulations to that. The main thing we say with the live traps is that if you're going to put one out, let's say you're trying to get a raccoon, expect to catch something else besides a raccoon. If you have a skunk nearby, you need to be prepared if a skunk gets in that trap that you have to handle it. So just be aware that just because you're going after one species doesn't mean another one's not going to get caught. So just keep that in mind when you put out live traps. Another thing to think about is that for a location to release these animals, you can release these animals anywhere you want to, but if it's on private property, or even some townships and some counties, you have to get permission from that landowner to go ahead and release an animal onto their property. But one thing I definitely want to hit on is if you are bit or scratched from an animal in a live trap, do not release that animal. And we have some slides on rabies later on that we'll talk about, but anytime that there's a human exposure like that, whether they're bit or scratched, we need to go ahead and unfortunately euthanize that animal to test it for rabies, because the human safety and health is most important at that point. Another thing we could do is exclusions, and I've had to do this on my home. If you have squirrels getting into your attic, or raccoons in the attic, or bats in the house, the best way to handle that is find where they're coming and going inside, getting inside the attic or even underneath the shed. And you can get these things. I just got mine on Amazon. It's called an exclusion cage. And so you attach it to where that animal is getting in and out of your home. And the way it works is that the animal is able to leave, but it blocks them from coming back in. So that way, let's say you have a couple squirrels in your attic. You put this excluder where they're coming and going. You can leave it up for a day, 2 days, 2 weeks, as long as you want to, until you stop hearing all the pitter patter in your attic, where you feel comfortable you got all of them, and then take that excluder off and patch that hole so they can't get back in. Some other pictures that you see there is for bats. Bats in houses, it happens all the time, especially your older homes. There's some seasonal restrictions when it comes to bat excluders, but this is really the #1 way to get rid of them. Again, you find where they're coming and going, and then for a simple exclusion is you take screen, like from a window screen, that same type of fabric, and if you tape it up on 3 sides, the top part and the 2 sides, but leave the bottom open, the bats are able to leave, when they during night, but then they can't get back in. So that's a way to we're not hurting the animals, they're leaving on their own, they just can't get back into your home. Next, we have birds. This is the big one, the springtime during bird nesting season. Unless it's a game species or an invasive species, essentially all birds are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So with that protection, there are seasonal restrictions on any sort of nuisance abatement activities that you can do for these birds. And if it falls within those seasonal restrictions, then you need to get a permit from USDA Wildlife Services in order to handle that. So when it comes to, like, look at these barn swallows making a nest and have their cute little babies underneath this overhang. Well, with that comes a lot of poop, right? So if you don't want these birds nesting in that area, what you can do is the moment they start building their nest, you can tear it down. You have every right to go tear that nest down until an egg is laid in the nest. At that point, they fall under those protections. You have to leave the nest alone until the birds hatch. They grow up and they fledge and they leave the nest, and they're no longer using that nest as a means of support or for any other reason. And at that time, when they leave the nest, you go ahead and tear it down. When it comes to other issues like black vultures, while black vultures are a necessary bird, they're highly intelligent, they're great with getting rid of dead animals on the landscape, and very helpful in our ecosystem. They can also be a nuisance. They can roost on houses and pick at your roof tiles and everything. And so for nuisance vulture work, that's when you really need to get involved with USDA Wildlife Services, and they can help you out either by giving you a permit, or they'll even come out and do some abatement strategies for you. All right, next, deer, the wonderfully suburban polarizing topic. It's a love-hate relationship with these deer. People love seeing them, but when they get to be too prolific on the landscape, they can end up being huge nuisance animals. So in this slide, you can see deer damage to landscaping and vehicles can cause a lot of economic strain. We had one gentleman enroll in one of our deer programs called DMAP, where he, on his landscape, paid $15,000 to landscape his property, especially with trying to put some native plants out there, and the deer came in and wiped them all out. So he was out $15,000. So he got enrolled in one of our hunting programs. But the one picture you see with those Leland cypress, the bottom part of those trees, that's not people pruning them. That's the deer coming in and eating them. And if you have deer coming in and eating your Leland cypresses, they are essentially starving. Those trees are, it's a last choice browse survey. And at that point, they're just trying to get something in their stomach to survive. Also, they could come into your rose bushes, and if they eat a little bit, that's fine, but they could hedge that stuff all the way to the ground. And even during breeding season, that last picture with the tree, you know, bucks come in and rub their antlers on some of these trees, and if the tree is small enough, they can end up killing that tree as well. So some numbers I pulled for Chester County, these are reported deer roadkill and road incidences in Chester County throughout the years. Road incidents is essentially the deer was hit by a vehicle but not recovered. It either ran off or something else happened. As you can see, we have a very strong trajectory from 2020 on, where every year it's just going up and up and up. And these numbers, while this trend is very strong, I also want to say that these numbers do not include deer that are hit on PennDOT managed highways. They have their own contractor that goes out and removes those deer. So these numbers do not include the PennDOT roads. And this is a trend that we're not just seeing in Chester County, we're seeing this throughout the whole Southeast. Some more on deer. Again, when deer get in too large in numbers, they could be detrimental to the habitat, to other wildlife, and even to themselves. So the first pictures of the nice woods, the first picture you see, it's green throughout the whole forest layers. We have green on the bottom, in your understory, green in your midstory, then you have your larger trees. The very next picture is essentially what happens when you have too many deer in that landscape. If they can reach it, they're going to eat it. So you have this very strong, what we call a browse line, where everything below the deer eating, and if it's green above, it's because they can't reach it. And now you've just lost all your habitat for your ground nesting birds, lost your habitat for your rabbits, anything that uses that lower level in that habitat cannot survive in those areas. But as far as that other picture that you see with, I don't even know how many deer in this picture with the trampoline. Anytime that you have deer that are congregating in that amount, it increases your chances for disease spread. So the one disease we'll talk about later is chronic wasting disease, but there's a variety of different diseases that the deer can get that they spread more easily in that environment. So if you think about if somebody has the flu and they're in a crowded elevator and they sneeze, chances are other people in the elevator are going to get the flu. Or for people that have kids in daycare and elementary school, you know, how often does your kid get sick through the year because all those kids are in that same small environment sharing all those germs. So at this point, if municipalities are having issues with deer and it's getting to the point where the public is saying it's a problem, we have a system through the Game Commission, and we partner with USDA Wildlife Services, where the municipality can actually contract them to come out there and do deer removals. There's a process to that application process. If that's something that a municipality is interested in, they can contact me. I can get them in contact with USDA Wildlife Services and help them through that whole process for the application. But one thing I definitely want to state, because this is something that people are concerned about, if a municipality or a landowner contracts USDA Wildlife Services, all the properties around there, they need landowner permission to go out on that property to do deer removals. They can't just drive around the streets and just shoot any deer they see. They have to have that landowner permission. They can't go out there without it. If it gets to the point where you have all these issues and you don't feel like dealing with yourself, we have our NUCOs. NUCOs stand for Nuisance Wildlife Control Operators. To get that list of NUCOs in our region, you could Google PGC Nuisance Wildlife. You can check out wildlifehelp.org, and there you can find a list of the permanent NUCOs for the whole state. Or you could call our central dispatch and ask them for a list of NUCOs for our area. These are people who are permitted through PGC to do wildlife removal work, but that's their business, so they're going to charge, which is why we like to talk about the options that you guys have to handle things on your own before you have to go to a NUCO. All right, getting into spring baby wildlife season. Let's talk a little bit about injured and orphaned wildlife. What do you do if you see one? Leave it alone. There's several reasons to that, which we're going to get to in the next slide. If you see something, you can call PGC or call your local wildlife rehab. We are very thankful that we have several good rehabs in our region. For PGC, There's our number right there for the central dispatch. That's 833 PGC Wild, and you'll see that on a couple other slides. There's also the link for the Pennsylvania Association of Wildlife Rehabbers that gives you a list of the phone numbers and areas for those rehabs in the whole state. And we also have something called WIN, Wildlife in Need, which is essentially permitted wildlife transporters, where if you can't get that animal to a rehab, you can call the Wildlife in Need people and set something where they pick up the animal and take it to the rehab. So why? Why do we tell people not to touch these things and just to leave it alone? Well, first, wild animals are supposed to be wild. So we get it every year. Somebody finds a baby raccoon or a baby squirrel or a baby deer, and they want to raise it as their own and do their best to rehab it for release. But then they fall in love with the animal and then they want to keep it as a pet. And wild animals are not pets. They're supposed to be wild. You're essentially kidnapping an animal and trying to make it a domestic animal. That's not fair to the animal itself. Also, wild animals can be very dangerous. So that owl in the soccer net, if you don't have proper training, if you don't have welding gloves or a towel or a crate to put that animal in, you could put yourself in danger trying to help that animal. Also, picking up the animals themselves can put you in a dangerous situation. So this goes back 20, 25 years, I want to say. But there was a story about a deer that was hit on the Schuylkill Expressway. And a young girl felt very bad for the deer. The deer was still alive. So she pulled off the side of the road to try and go help the deer, and she herself got hit and killed on the highway. So we definitely don't want people putting themselves in harm's danger trying to help a wild animal in need. Wild animals can carry various diseases, which is the latter part of this presentation. So looking at these raccoons over here, as you can see, one being held and snuggled a little bit with bare hands and no protection, and the other one has those welding gloves to hold on to that baby raccoon. I mean, I just pulled the bare-handed raccoon off the internet, but if that was the case here in Pennsylvania, we would have to be confiscating that animal and unfortunately euthanizing it for rabies testing. Raccoons are a rabies vector species, and rabies is a very serious disease that we don't want anybody getting hurt from. Also, parent animals can vitally protect their young. Go ahead and try and grab one of those little baby geese and try and help them. You're going to get, slapped by mom and dad goose over there. And also, just because you see a baby animal doesn't mean that mom and dad aren't hiding in the bushes and you just don't see them. So we're just not going to do that and not put ourselves in a position to get hurt. But with all that said, there are situations where you can help some baby animals. When they're not rabies vector species, you can do some help yourself. When it comes to baby birds, that far right picture, obviously the person should be wearing gloves, and it's not from mom and dad bird smelling human scent and not wanting to care for their young anymore. Birds themselves, unless it's a vulture, have very, very poor sense of smell. But we want to make sure we keep you safe. Avian influenza is a big problem right now in our region, which we'll talk about later. And so we want to make sure people are safe before they handle these animals. The other bird, robin on the ground, the fledgling, if you pick up that bird and try to put it back in the nest, it's just going to jump right back out. Fledging is a natural time for birds to learn how to fly. And even though it's on the ground, people will say, well, I'm worried about my cat getting it, or I'm worried about my dog getting it. You have control over your cat or dog. So you're able to either put your dog on a leash before these birds can fly. That's a better option than trying to put this bird back in the nest. Baby rabbits, if it's found on the ground, you go ahead and put it back in the ground nest if you want to. The one on the far left, as you can see, its eyes are open, its ears are up, it doesn't have that white spot on the forehead, and while that looks pretty small, that rabbit is perfectly fine to be on its own. If you do want to help baby animal, do not feed that animal. Contact your local wildlife rehab, get it to the rehab. If you try and feed it yourself, different animals feed different ways when it comes to these babies. And so if you do it incorrectly, you can cause that animal to aspirate, which can actually lead the animal to die and not have a very good outcome in the rehab facility. Baby deer, little fawns. This is a big one. The one thing that I cannot stress enough, the vast majority of fawns that you find, I don't care if this fawn is in your garden bed next to your home. I don't care if it's in your kid's sandbox. Majority of times that fawn is not abandoned. From the time that fawn is born to about a month old, it's too weak, it's not strong enough to follow mom around. So mom puts it in a spot that she thinks is safe. And she could leave up to 8 hours. She'll go get a bite to eat, meet with her friends, get her nails done, do whatever she has to do, and then come back to check on her fawn. If she thinks it's a safe spot after that, and after she feeds it, she can go ahead and leave it there again for another up to 8 hours. Or if she comes back and she's like, I don't like this area anymore, I'm going to go ahead and move you, she could move it to a new location, but still end up being in your yard. If she sees you or smells you, she's not going to step out. So if you're standing over there on top of the fawn, looking around, saying, where's mama? She's not going to come out if she sees you. And it's in that fawn's instinct to remain still when approached by a predator. That fawn doesn't know you. That fawn thinks that you're a predator. So if it doesn't move, it doesn't mean that it's starving. It doesn't mean it's dehydrated. It doesn't mean anything like that. Leave the fawn alone. And if you have questions and concerns, you could call the Game Commission or call your local wildlife rehab, and they can kind of talk you through that whole situation. But we definitely want to avoid people picking up these fawns thinking they're doing the right thing, and they're essentially, to put it bluntly, you're kidnapping that fawn. We want to avoid that at all costs. Okay, last common wildlife diseases. I say last, we still have a lot to go through. I'll talk a little bit about avian influenza, just because of the big outbreak that we've had, chronic wasting disease because it's spreading throughout the state, and rabies and mange because they're big diseases for the local area. Avian influenza. So, and I'll refer to this sometimes as HPAI, which is highly pathogenic avian influenza. It was first detected in Pennsylvania in 2022 in wild birds, but since then it really hasn't done anything. You'll find a dead bird here, dead bird there that tests positive, but there was no big issues across the state. These AI viruses are naturally occurring in wild birds, especially our waterfowl and our shorebirds. So from the vast number of birds that are out there, it's not a disease that we could do anything to control in the wild. With our current outbreak, it started late December 2024, and it just came out of nowhere. The epicenter was in Lehigh, Northampton counties, affected mainly snow geese. Well, snow geese at that time, they flock in, 20, 30, 40,000 birds at a time in these quarries up in those areas because the quarries never froze over. And so they just passed it to each other. And we ended up, it was essentially dead. Our birds were flying out of the sky. It was absolutely incredible. So we pulled PG staff from various projects, pulled PG staff from other regions, worked with our state and federal agencies that we work with often to assist in cleanups. And while reporting sick and dead birds are down from the peak in January, we're still seeing a consistent number of reports of non-negatives or essentially positives from our sampling efforts in the Southeast. So for response and testing, with the call volume that we're receiving for dead birds, it's not possible for us to pick up every single one of these calls that we get. Since January to March 8th is when I pulled these numbers, we've had 1,000 calls alone just dealing with sick and dead birds from this outbreak. So we, in order not to overload the labs, we're only testing certain animals. So essentially, if it's a target species, and we haven't had a positive in that county for that species, we'll go ahead and test it, or anything that we consider high profile situations. So if there's a dead bird in a schoolyard, or a dead bird on the zoo grounds, or one near a poultry industry, we want to go ahead and test those birds and make sure those people have answers. So far, Chester County has been relatively quiet. We've only had 2 detections so far. Berks County, 14 detections, and really from that Lehigh Northampton area, it kind of goes through Berks and over towards Lancaster, Lebanon. That's our main swath of where a lot of our positives were. So what do you do if you find the dead bird? Wild birds can be found sick or dead for a variety of reasons. It may not be from the bird flu. However, due to the outbreak, anything that is a target species, we are considering suspect. So our target species are waterfowl, raptors, scavengers, and other birds that die in groups of 5 or more. Scavengers being your vultures, eagles, ravens and crows, gulls, things like that, and even raptors. Anything that would scavenge on a dead bird, we consider suspect. So if you see something, call our PGC Central Dispatch number. That's that number again, PGC Wild, and that goes directly to a warden, and depending on that warden's task load and the priority of that call, the warden can come and pick up that bird. While PGC does not promote the public picking up dead wildlife, if you want to dispose of it yourself, those are the guidelines that we give. Make sure you're wearing gloves. Put that carcass in a plastic trash bag, and then put that into a second trash bag, so that we're essentially double bagging it. And at that point, it can go directly into your residential trash. And afterwards, just make sure you wash your hands. So if you go to pa.gov, and this is for anything besides avian influenza, if you type into the search bar avian influenza, all these links come up with information from the Game Commission, Department of Ag, Department of Health. And one of these examples is this H5N1 bird flu, which is our Department of Health website. All those on the right-hand side are all PDFs that you can print out that has bird flu information. Okay, off to rabies. Rabies is a significant public health concern due to being nearly 100% fatal without treatment. We have multiple strains of rabies, but in Pennsylvania, mainly it's raccoon rabies that we see a lot of. So our rabies vector species are foxes, raccoons, skunks, coyotes, bats, and groundhogs. But really, if it's a mammal, it could potentially be affected by rabies. So this chart right here that I have, these are our, for 2024, our average reported rabies positive cases in Chester, Berks, and Montgomery County. And as you can see, it starts slow in January, but by the end of the year, November and December in Chester County, we're over. That's actually 12 plus cases in Chester County for those months. So my totals that I have for 2024, Chester County, we had 68 positives. Berks, we had 69 positives, and Montgomery, we had 64 positives, for a grand total of 202 rabies positive cases in those three counties in 2024, and that's for wild and domestic animals. If you are exposed to a wild animal, especially rabies vector species, it is imperative that we test that animal. So what's considered an animal exposure? If you're bitten or scratched by a wild animal, or if you're holding a wild animal and you have any sort of open wound or break in your skin or come in contact at all with any of the mucous membranes of that animal. For bats, because bats are so small, and we love our bats, we don't want all our bats to be tested. However, if a bat is found in the same room with a sleeping person, an unattended child, or anyone who is unsure if they were bitten or scratched, that bat needs to be euthanized for testing. So what do you do if you find a wild mammal with any sort of neurological symptoms, or if you're exposed to a rabies suspect animal? Call us, call PGC. There's a number again, PGC Wild. The game warden will remove the animal if it's still around. Obviously if you get bit by something and it runs off, there's not a whole lot we can do. But if the animal's still around, we're going to collect it and we're going to send it in for rabies testing immediately. If you're exposed or concerned about your health, contact your doctor. We help out with testing the animal, but we are not medical experts. So anything like that, as far as getting post-exposure shots, that all needs to go through your doctor. Any sort of from testing, any positives or inconclusive results will be reported back to the person from the Department of Health or the Department of Ag. And if it's not you that's exposed, if it's your animal, if you're going for a walk and your dog gets into a fight with a raccoon or whatever, call your veterinarian. Hopefully your dog is up to date in their vaccines, but they still may want to do a booster. And same with the other one that we have, pa.gov. You go to the search bar, type in rabies. Those are all links that come up for the Game Commission, Department of Ag, and Department of Health with resources for rabies in Pennsylvania. This is a very cool website that you can go to. Just Google it, PA Rabies Tracking Dashboard. This is something that you can go in there and look at different counties, different months and different years to see how many rabies positive cases were found in those counties. So this right here, this is December 2024. You can see Chester County has 12 plus cases, which we had in that chart earlier. But you can also see on the right, left-hand side, the different animals that tested positive. So we had a little bit of dog, a little bit of cat, but it's mainly raccoon, bats, and cats that tested positive in that month. Okay, chronic wasting disease. This is a deer disease. This is a nasty one. It's a contagious, always fatal brain disease, similar to mad cow disease in cattle and Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease in people. Until a deer is at that clinical stage towards the end of this disease, you can look at a deer and have no idea if it's positive or not for chronic wasting disease. But those end stages, the deer's going to look emaciated, could be drooling, it's going to have neurological issues, it could be just walking in circles, unaware of human interaction. It's very, very sad to see. And while it's not proven to be transmitted to humans, the CDC recommends not consuming meat from any deer that is positive for chronic wasting disease. So our current status in Pennsylvania are all those red dots and yellow dots. The yellow dots are from penned deer, and the red dots are wild deer. So they're mainly found in South Central Pennsylvania, but it's to a point now where our heaviest density for deer is 32% of deer testing positive in those hotspots in South Central Pennsylvania. That's ridiculous. That's 1 in 3 deer is positive for chronic wasting disease. Thankfully, in our area, northern Dauphin, northern Lebanon, and Schuylkill counties are starting to get some positives, but thankfully it's very, very low density right now. And the closest thing to Chester County is we have Lancaster County has some positives, but so far those are all in penned deer. So this is what a management area looks like. When we get a positive, whether it's a penned deer or a wild deer, we go out there, we throw these buffers around it for our disease management areas. So in these areas, we have increased surveillance, we test roadkill deer, we test hunter deer. If you're inside one of these DMAs, you can't be moving your high-risk deer parts outside the DMA. We have head bins set up to get your deer tested. We take our surveillance very serious inside these DMAs to see actually how prevalent the disease is in that area. For testing, so what can you do to help reduce the spread of chronic wasting disease? So first, report any sort of sick deer that you see. Again, there's that number again, PGC wild. Roadkill deer, if it's not on a PennDOT road, we'll come scoop it up, we'll get that deer tested as well. Do not feed deer, like we said earlier. The more you congregate animals, the more it can spread a variety of diseases around, not just chronic wasting disease. And for your hunters, if you're inside a DMA, we highly suggest you get your head tested. This is what one of our head bins look like. They have trash bags there. It gives you all the information on how to do that. If you're not in a DMA, you could go ahead and get your own head tested for send in for sampling. Or you can just drive it to a DMA and jump in a head bin. We don't care where the heads come from in the head bins. If it's in there, we're going to test it for you. And like everything else, the same website, pa.gov, type in CWD, and it shows you all the links for our CBD website. Or you could also call, we have a CBD hotline that you call 833-INFO-CBD, or there's a website right there as well. You contact our CBD team for any questions that you have. All right, and last I have mange, and I saved mange for last because it's one that is very visibly seen on the landscape when it's a problem. So mange is a common, highly contagious mammal skin disease caused by mites. There's really 3 main types of mites, with sarcoptic mange being the most common. So the main information I have on here is for that sarcoptic mange. Another one that people hear a lot of is the Demodex mange. And that's one that is on all mammals. Everybody's got them, and they usually don't cause any external issues like hair loss that you see with the sarcoptic, unless there's some sort of issue with something that's going on with that animal that causes their immune system to go down, which may make those the mites be able to make a bigger impact on the animal. So for sarcoptic mange, the big one that we see around here, it's transferred between individuals from the environment, in between individuals. So like in foxes, if they're sharing a fox den, all that bedding in that fox den may have that mite, and that's how that gets spread between the foxes. And everybody knows that with mange, the common symptoms that you see is that you have the hair loss with the scab, thick skin, and then some of those severe cases will include secondary infections just because they're scratching at themselves because they itch so much, weight loss, loss of fear, and if it's a bad enough case, can actually even lead to death. So mange treatment, really all these diseases that we're talking about, these are naturally occurring common diseases on the landscape. Anything like that is extremely difficult to control or even impossible to control in wild populations. When an animal is picked up and taken to a vet or a wildlife rehabber, treatment is very easy for mange. And a lot of animals are successfully treated under that type of care. But there is issues with people trying to treat free-range wild animals for mange. So first of all, many animals are perfectly fine. They're gonna heal on their own. If they have just a slight case of mange, it's not something to be super worried about. As far as, again, with the treatment, the PGC used to have a protocol where we do a lot of bear trapping. So in bear trapping, if we trap a bear with mange, we would treat it with ivermectin, send it on its way. Well, we decided to do a study to see if that was even worth it. And what the study was showing is that any bear that had a severe case of mange, whether it was treated with ivermectin or not, that did not change the outcome of that bear. The majority of those bears did not survive. So that changed our entire protocol, or we don't treat bears with ivermectin anymore. If it's a trap bear and it has a severe case of mange, we can mainly euthanize it because we know through that study what that outcome is going to be. As far as placing baits on the landscape to try and help these animals, a lot of negativity to that as well. It can impact non-target species that really shouldn't be having ivermectin. Even some domestic dogs like collies do not do well with ivermectin, and so it's not a heartworm treatment that's given to them. But also it can cause drug resistance in mites if not fully dosed. So like, let's say you have an infection, your doctor gives you an antibiotic. The doctor tells you you need to take that full course of antibiotic. Even if you feel better on day 3, but you have 7 days of antibiotic, you got to take that whole course. Because if you don't, any bacteria that's left in your system that antibiotic did not get could potentially mutate and create this antibiotic resistant bacteria. We don't want to see that with ivermectin and these mites. We're already seeing on the landscape, especially in the South, where heartworms are becoming immune to ivermectin. I myself, my dogs when we were down south, we treat with ivermectin all the time for heartworms. And at 12 years old, I had 2 of my dogs test positive for heartworm, and it blew my mind. And so I had to, swap treatments to get them past that. We don't want to see that with ivermectin and the mites. Also, sometimes when these animals have really bad cases of mange, it's because they have something else going on in their system. Whether they're positive for rabies, which has caused their immune system to go down, or distemper, or maybe they've had some rat poison from eating some dead animals that had poisoning. There could be a variety of other things going on where you could be treating for or attempting to treat for the mange, but you're not treating the other issue that the animal has that's going to die from it anyway. And also, once you do your treatment and you stop, that risk for mites and for mange goes right back up. It has to be a continuous, nonstop treatment to make any sort of difference. And push comes to shove, if you don't have a medical license, if you're not a veterinarian, or even our wildlife rehabbers, they don't have medical licenses, but they work underneath a veterinarian, you can't practice medicine without a permit or a license. So, same as everything else, what do you do if you find a mangy fox? Leave it alone. There's a big theme in this. If you see something, just leave it alone first. Don't go run up to it to try and save it. Think about it first. Like anything else, if you're bitten or scratched trying to help a fox, your best intentions to help that animal will now sentence it to be euthanized for rabies testing to make sure that the people are safe. So call for help. There's that PGC number again, PGC Wild. The website again for our wildlife rehabbers, and the website again for our wildlife in need wildlife transporters to get those animals to a rehab that can properly treat. This right here is an example. The first picture, just a fox and live trap, got that from the internet, but the rest of them are from a rehab that I used to work with down in Louisiana. You can see that fox is in real bad shape in that first middle picture. He was in terrible shape, but through proper treatment, and that is even topical treatment. That's not just use of something like ivermectin. That's topical treatments as well, and being cared for other issues that they had, like worms. He looked great, and he was eventually released. So that's what we want to see when we actually help these animals out. Similar to everything else, PI.gov, type in mange, and it comes up with all of our PGC information regarding mange in Pennsylvania. And with that, any questions?
While other folks are thinking about that, Kid, I had a question for you on, it predates your time back in PA, but in this area, Northern Chester County, back in, I think it was 2018, 2019, we had a huge deer mortality event, with EHD. And I got a little wind that it was starting to bubble up again last year in parts of the area before it got super dry. Anything to share about EHD and what the Game Commission's working on there?
Yeah, so EHD and its sister disease, blue tongue, are something that when we have large outbreaks in the northern states can be really kind of detrimental to local deer populations. It's caused by a biting insect. And so there are certain times of the year where there's more biting insects, and so they're more exposed to that to get EHD. Um, the past couple of years, we've had a couple positive cases in the southeast as a whole, and that's something that we monitor. We partner with Penn Vets through their Wildlife Futures program, and so we have Wildlife Futures staff throughout the whole state that help with our disease monitoring. If we get a dead animal or a sick animal that we have to euthanize, we give it to them, and they do a necropsy, which is an animal autopsy. They take samples. We send them into the lab for testing to see what happened to that animal. So that's how we are better able to manage and monitor diseases across the state. And with EHD, like I said, we've had a couple of positives pop up here and there, but no sort of big outbreak in the past 2 years.
While it's tragic for the deer, I would say if you walk around in the woods in North Coventry, you see a lot of 5 and 6 year old oaks where you wouldn't historically, just because there was so much deer mortality. So there's a
Yeah.
great study to be done by somebody about forest regeneration after these outbreaks.
It
Um,
coming back up here was very interesting to see that in some cases we still have to high fence part of our game lands to keep deer out to for the oaks and all the other trees to regenerate to get to a point where they're not going to be impacted by the deer when we take the fences down.
One from Shelley on the chat. It says, "What about opossums? Do they carry rabies the same as other other animals?"
So possums are not one of our typical rabies vector species, but it is still possible for them to be infected by rabies. And it's the same thing as squirrels. Squirrels aren't really a species that we see a lot of rabies in at all, but if it's a mammal, it has the potential to be infected by rabies.
For that, because I think I was actually under the impression that opossums were immune from rabies for whatever reason. I think that's part of the popular imagination for some reason.
And so same thing with picking up baby birds because mom and dad are gonna smell you and not take care of the baby anymore. Um, right, possums are very, very cool animals. They do things in the ecosystem, the landscape that other animals can't do. So typically, a majority of the time, they don't get rabies, but it's not impossible. Uh, every day, I get just a quick little glance. This is what one of these forms looks like, where the labs send me rabies results from things that the PGC has sent in for testing. And I believe I've had one that was a possum that was positive, but that is very, very rarely seen. Um, the 7 years I was in Louisiana, we had one squirrel in all 7 years that tested positive for rabies. So it's almost like is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No.
A follow up on the possum questions. Is it true that they feast on ticks?
They eat a pile of ticks. They are really cool. I know some people think that they're ugly, but they are very cool animals to have in the ecosystem. Um, they're big on insect eating, especially with the ticks. They're also scavengers, and so they help clean up after some animals die and doing that whole cleanup process similar to vultures. They're just very, very cool animals.
If nobody had any other questions, I'd like to thank you, Kate, for helping out with the webinar, and look forward to positive wildlife interactions and with the Game Commission.
Thank you for having me. And that my contact information is up there if anybody wants to call or email me with anything else in the future.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, Kate.
Thank you.